Hello everyone, I am Merp Man and this is the Entwife campaign. Finally, I get to talk about the Entwives. In the previous videos, we've covered the Merp Middle-earth role-playing rules and some of the other things that we need to take into account before the Entwife campaign starts off. This part right here is a part that I've been looking forward to for a while. I'm splitting this up. The Entwives, the background on the Entwives, I'm going to be covering in this video. The next video, I'm going to be attempting to do my best to cover the lands to the east. That's going to be a big deal. Anyway, for this video, the Entwives, I'm going to be doing my best to take into account what's said about the Entwives in The Lord of the Rings. I don't know if they're really mentioned in The Hobbit that much. The Silmarillion, they are mentioned in there. I'm going to do my best to bring to light what J.R.R. Tolkien and Christopher Tolkien described about the Entwives. That's the primary thing. And then I'm going to be going into what Middle-earth role-playing and all of its editors have come up with to flesh out more of what the Entwives were like, their attitudes, and where they were, where they traveled, supposedly. And from there, we're going to do our best to make guesses as to where they are going or where they might have gone. So with that, as we can see right here, this big map of northwestern Middle Earth. I'm going to cover a little bit of the Entwife or the Ents and the Entwife background. We're going to get into detail right after, right after this. So for the Ents, everything started here by these mountains in Eriador. During the Second Age, the Ents moved from the White Mountains here through Eriador, and group by group, they settled in Fangorn Forest here. Unfortunately, at this time, the Second Age, when this Ent migration was happening, the Númenóreans, that is the great-great-grandfathers of Aragorn and so on, were conquering the land from Sauron. Well, okay, so there's actually two pieces to this. The first part is the rings of power being made. The rings of power being made, and the island of Numenor falling. I just want to zoom in a little bit because I think. Okay, unfortunately, oh yeah, there's Ostinate Hill right there. So during the middle of the Second Age, Sauron, disguised, uh, made the one ruling ring and helped the elves make the other rings of power in Ostinate Hill. When his treachery was found out, their wars pretty much devastated this whole land, which may be another reason why the Ents and the Entwives moved from here, from the old forest, which there's hardly anything left of it now, over to Fangorn Forest, or Fangorn. I like saying Fang. when Sauron fell at the end of the Second Age, when that's when it was discovered that the Entwives were lost. We're going to be coming back to this map. It's going to be a lot easier showing you via a timeline. Before we get to the timeline, I forgot I put this up here. These are the rules I'm going to be trying to abide by, especially talking about the area and the lands to the east. Derive an understanding of Western activity and the overall world setting. That's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure your research shows no conflict with the sparse data found in primary sources, meaning Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, so on and so forth. You'll see just where this goes. Here's a timeline, and I've underlined and highlighted things that specifically relate to the Ents and the Entwives. At the beginning of the Second Age, the Ents start migrating. At 1300, Treebeard gets the Fangorn Forest. See, he's got, okay, now this is, we have to understand that this timeline is made up by the authors and creators of Middle-earth role-playing. Their conjecture is, I guess, as good as any, unless, of course, Christopher Tolkien decides to come up with a more specific timeline. But until that happens, this is what I'm going to use for defining the events and times that those events actually happened in regards to the Entwife campaign. Treebeard relocates, he brings some Entwives with him. See right here, the Rings of Power are made. And Sauron makes the ruling ring. Here at 1620, more Ents end up in Fangorn Forest. Here, Sauron makes war on the elves of Eregion, that whole area between the White Mountains and the Misty Mountains. Large tracts of forests are devastated. Sauron retreats to Mordor. Leaflock moves his people to Fangorn Forest, so more elves, or not elves, more Ents are moving to Fangorn Forest. Now I've underlined this in blue just to help us keep track of Sauron and what he's doing in the meantime that could impact and affect what happens to the Entwives and what kind of life they might have because of it. The Ents and Entwives at this time are slowly beginning to grow apart in mind. The Entwives at this time move out of Fangorn Forest to the plains near Fangorn Forest. Let's quick take a look at what that means. So this whole land was just getting devastated by the wars between Sauron and the elves. The Ents moved to Fangorn Forest, and then at that time around 2250 or so, Second Age, the Entwives start moving out of Fangorn Forest into this vale here. Now this is called the Wold. The brown lands are on the other side of the Anduin River here. It doesn't actually call them that. I'll show you guys a map of that in a little bit. But at that time, sometime between 1800 and 2250, more than likely near the end of 2250 is when the Entwives start moving out. A whole 250 years afterwards, the Entwives cross the Anduin River and make a garden paradise in the Brown Lands. Okay, so it takes 250 years for the Entwives to go from outside of Fangorn Forest to crossing the Anduin River. Why that is important is because it's useful to see just how far the Entwives move in a certain period of time. That's going to help us extrapolate just how far the Entwives could have moved in the time between them crossing the river and the Battle of Dagorlad, which is right here. So that's roughly 250 years. 34-35, the Battle of Dagorlad rages, and the Entwives are lost. And now it's kind of funny, as it takes 26 years after this for the Ents in Fangorn Forest to find out that the Entwives are missing. And they start searching for them at that time. Okay, so not long after the Battle of Dagorlad, the Second Age ends, and the Third Age begins. What I've discovered is that if the Entwives move at the rate that they started, so around 250 years between moving out of Fangorn Forest to crossing the Anduin River, the Battle of Dagorlad happens not quite 1,000 years later. So not quite 4 times. Oops, wrong one. 4 times the amount of time. So if it took 250 years for the Entwives to go from here or here to here, mostly that's 2 squares, maybe 2 squares and a bit more. And we'll take that times 4. 2 squares and a bit more. 1, 2, and a bit. 1, 2, and a bit. 1, 2. Well, we'll even just taking it 3 because my map ends right about here. The Entwives in the 935 years following their crossing of the Anduin River, if they continued to move, they could have been all the way out to the other side of the Sea of Ruin instead of being in Dagorlad. And that's one of my theories, is that the Entwives were not anywhere near Dagorlad, or I was going to say, or possibly even in the Brown Lands. And you will see why. Anyway, so this gives the idea that according to the main theories of what happened to the Entwives, the main theory is that the Entwives were wiped out during the Battle of Dagorlad, and I don't think so. And let me show you why. Here's Merpman doing some thinking. If the Entwives were in Dagorlad when the battle started, Ents are conspicuous. They're big. They're big. They can be seen from far away. You have you have the elves and the men on the one side, and then you've got orcs and maybe some trolls, and because trolls are pretty tall, you could see them. But you should be able to see ents and entwives. Well, in this case, entwives, because that's where they're supposed to be, or were said to be. They're conspicuous. They would have been seen and remembered by men at that time, but elves especially, who were in the battle, such as Elrond and probably Glorfindel, those guys would have seen them, and they would have remembered that if the Entwives were there. Right. Number two, unless Entwives can't go into a rage like Ents, it's impossible with a capital I to think that having their perfectly ordered garden paradise trampled and ruined wouldn't have sent them into a devastating frenzy. Just as the Ents, when they attacked Isengard in Lord of the Rings, it didn't take very many to do a lot. In the same way here, supposing that Entwives get upset when their gardens are demolished, they would have gotten upset as well and would have made a huge impact on the Battle of Dagorlad had they been there. Now, right, it's my other, and it's not up here. Uh, Another factor that I like to put in is that Ents and Entwives are not easy to kill. And stealing a quote from the Addams family, they're not easy to kill even with a chainsaw. And of course, the quote from the Addams family is the human spirit is hard to kill even with a chainsaw. And now you might think, well, Merp Man, a chainsaw would probably be the perfect thing to take out an ent or an entwife. And no, it wouldn't. An ent on his own or an entwife on her own is bad enough, but when they are enraged, the whole earth just trembles. And so trying to tackle an ent or an entwife with a chainsaw, I would never try it. It would be a very devastating, stupid thing to do. Ents are difficult to kill, or should it, technically speaking. I mean, they can get taken out like anything else, but they're really tough. And so if they were there again, if the Entwives were there in Dagorlad, one, they're difficult to kill just like Ents, and two, chances are they would have been upset, and that would have really made a difference in how the battle was conducted and how that went. Oh, yes, and three, it's hard to believe that the Entwives were unaware of the gathering armies and decided to do nothing about it. Okay, sure, Ents and Entwives, they like to be passive. I don't know. Right. Are Entwives even more passive in nature than Ents? And there is a going theory that the Entwives were duped by the enemy or Sauron at that time or near that time. I'm not going to go any farther down because we're going to learn a bit more about the attitude of Entwives. And thank goodness we get to take some of this directly from The Lord of the Rings. So the Entwives, just like men and women are different, Ents and Entwives are different. Entwives, according to this, are more interested in using the earth to grow the things that they wanted to grow. Now, this quote from The Lord of the Rings is quite useful and revealing as to the attitude of the Entwives. They, according to The Lord of the Rings, the Entwives like to be in control, and they like things to go the way that they want, the way that they want, the way that they order. And so that's just it. So knowing that or understanding that, to me, it makes it difficult to believe that the Entwives would have just sat by letting their paradise get ruined by a whole bunch of men, elves, and otherwise. Here, of course, it mentions them crossing the river and setting up their gardens. The males would come to them on occasion to visit. And here, the author here of this MERP module says that the females move their gardens several times, each time moving further from the forest than the males. So this kind of dovetails on my idea that okay, they may have set up their gardens in the brown lands, yet I don't know, if you got too many cooks in the kitchen, those cooks just don't get along that well. And so I could see that certain Entwives getting too close to other Entwives and setting up what they want to be growing and how they want it to grow would continue to move eastward. And this supports that idea. Um, it supports that idea. The Entwives taught men about agriculture. So they like to order things, but they're also kind and they want to share their knowledge about growing things to men. And so that's nice. That gives another side of the Entwives where okay, they like to have things their way, yet um, they also enjoy teaching others how to grow things. Okay, and this we know is true that the wars and the battles did destroy their gardens. What used to be their gardens is now the brown lands. Yep, what happened to them is what we're trying to figure out. So the main theories, and here I even numbered them as well. Some think that they were completely destroyed. Others think that they hid. Too scared. Now, of course, the question is where would they hide? I think that they fled eastward. Those that are not killed, captured by Sauron to provide food for his armies. I doubt that seriously. Unless Sauron really had a way to blackmail him, I have no idea why Endwise would actually go along with such an idea. Number three there is really what I think happened, and of course is what the Entwife campaign is all about. The campaign is geared to go east to find them, yet there are still these other possibilities that we may or may not test to see if they are true. The Ents, the ones that think about the Entwives, mourn their loss. I kept this page in here only because it helps us understand how the active trees, the Hurons, actually operate. They can operate passively. And now I say this only because traveling around with an Ent, quick beam is going to be the Ent of choice here, in order to learn, possibly learn, if the Entwives have been through a certain area or forest, quick beam will be talking to the trees. And of course, I'm guessing it's probably faster to talk to a partially awakened tree than just a tree. And so I'm guessing that Hurons will be part of the creatures that the Entwife campaign will come across. If they're nice, well, if they're not nice, well, take that back. If they want to not harm us, they will redirect us out, or try to redirect us out. If they want to do us great harm, their Hurons, what they do is they encircle the party and then just beat them up. That's pretty much what happened. That's pretty much what happened. It is what happened to the Orc army that had attacked the Hornburg on their retreat, and they were never seen again. Now, according to this work, the west and I guess the southwestern part of Middle Earth have been searched already for the Entwives with no results. After Third Age, Ents could sometimes be seen walking around. So supposedly after the ring is destroyed, Ents are more freely moving around, according to this. Changing modules. This is a different module, one that was created earlier than the one that we just looked at. Has a little bit more to say about the Entwives. Actually has a lot to say. Well, here. When the Ents and Entwives lived together, a harmony was formed, much like the partnership of heaven and earth. So the Ents secured a link with the elements of air and fire and spoke to the winds and birds in the sky. Entwives provided a link, according to these folks, with the elements of earth and water, and it was their way to sing to the rivers and stones and order their plentiful gardens. Why I'm making a big deal of this? Okay, so the first asterisk there, Entwives performed a complementary task of seeing to things closer to the soil and to the underground necessities of the trees. Well, things that grow. They created intricate underground networks of chinks and holes, tunnels and waterways, and their needs were, yes, lovingly served by earthworms, so on and so forth. Now, why is this important? Because of this, there's another theory that the Entwives went underground and are hiding there to this day. Okay, so here many speak of moving trees periodically seen Eriador. Well, Eriador is the land that got totally ravaged by Sauron and the elves after the Rings of Power were made. These moving trees are not going to be Entwives. Others say they fled east. Okay, and that's what we think, or what I think. Some conjecture that they migrated under the earth to mingle with their own elements. Indeed, one might delve beneath the brown lands today and still find evidence of the Entwives. Without the deft touch and gentle love of the Entwives, growth could no longer prosper. So this is kind of cute. Some say that if only the Ents would return with their songs to the sky and the wind, the Entwives would also resurface and the brown lands would grow green again. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Oh, shoot. I thought for sure. Okay. I believe in this module there is there's a adventure scenario description that they suggest could be a scenario, and that is actually traveling into the Brown Lands, and I guess are these mounds. The Brown Lands, where the Entwives were at one time, are filled with these mounds that that they had constructed to uh, put parts of their gardens and stuff on. And the adventure suggests that if someone were to dig in and through these mounds, that they could uh, either find some artifacts of the Entwives or find some trace or some clue as to where the Entwives may have gone. Now, with that, one of the reasons why it took me so long to put together or get together all the information that I could about the Entwives is because I went down a rabbit hole. And this is part of the rabbit hole. Here are the Brown Lands right here. Let's see if I can zoom in. Brown Lands. Now this is a game master map. So it has the area. We have southern Mirkwood right here. We have the Brown Lands and the Anduin River and the Wold on the other side. I had remembered this map and this number 12 right here. Number 12 here signifies a secret entrance to Dol Guldur. Now, Dol Guldur is where Sauron set up shop. Okay, so now when I had remembered this, it's like, really? There's a secret passage here, and this is the Brown Lands, and this is where the Entwives were. Did Sauron... Well, here, I actually wrote it down to help me out. There's a secret entrance to Dol Guldur, yep, from the Brown Lands, where the Entwives had their garden paradise. And that's number 12. Could Sauron have been influencing them or kidnapping them through this tunnel? And I really entertained that thought for a long time, because that would have pretty much put the kibosh on, or could have put the kibosh on, any eastward travel to find the Entwives, because it made a ton of sense that, hey, Sauron could have been there and prompted them to go hide into the earth so that the Entwives could be there, or that Sauron had secreted some of them away, or who knows. But after thinking about it for quite some time, there are two reasons why this doesn't work. The second one is the main reason, but first, if the Entwives were masters of the ground and things underground, they would have known about the tunnel and any activity in it. And they, being masters of such underground abilities, they should have been able to put a stop to it if they wanted to. But more importantly, the time frame doesn't support the theory. The Entwives were there in the Brown Lands in the middle and near the end of the Second Age. Sauron enters Dol Guldur 1,000 years into the Third Age, so that's way too long. And so when I looked more into it, I tried to figure out what was going on in that area at that time. At that time, Mirkwood was not called Mirkwood, it was still called Greenwood the Great. And in that area of Dol Guldur, that mountain and the hills and stuff around that area, dwarves were mining. It's kind of difficult to know exactly when they were mining, but they were mining that area from everything that I've read. And so Sauron, and more than likely that tunnel was, well, Sauron wasn't there for one, and two, that tunnel, it's hard to know when that tunnel was created, if it was created by Sauron, if it was created by someone else. it doesn't. My guess is that the tunnel wasn't made until sometime after the Third Age started, and that would have still be way after the Entwives had have disappeared. So it was a neat idea while it lasted, but it just doesn't pan out. Just does not pan out. Okay. Here, considering the Entwife campaign and where we may find them, the most likely scenarios that I came up with, and you guys may have more ideas. I would love to hear them. You have to comment. Or if you think that some of these ideas are totally outrageous, you'll have to let me know about that too. But here, from least plausible or least likely to the most. Oh, yeah. So the Entwives were in Daggerlad and all of them were destroyed. I doubt that very seriously. The Entwives in Daggerlad hid underground. Highly, highly unlikely. Maybe possible. I suppose it's something to that we may have to look into. The Endwives were captured by the enemy and taken to Mordor or to the east. Highly unlikely. Possible, maybe, but highly unlikely. The Entwives, seeing the conflict to come, moved away to the east before the battle started. So this is different from 5 in that the Entwives, my thought is that the Entwives still gradually, over time, just moved entirely out of the area to the east, which would be 5. But another possibility is that the Entwives could see that trouble was coming and decided to leave before it got to them. One of the ideas that helped fuel the idea that the Entwives are hiding in the earth is that we know that Ents, when they get upset, they can like break the ground and do a whole bunch of fantastic things. They have a whole bunch of abilities that some we know and some we don't. Do the Entwives themselves possess powers and abilities that are different from the Ents that we don't know? And of course, these would be focused on what we're learning about the Entwives and their ability to manipulate the ground and tunnels and stuff like that. If they actually do have powers and abilities that allow them to work the ground like that, then there is every possibility that they could be hiding underground in the brown lands, just waiting to be discovered. Maybe they're asleep or maybe they're hibernating or whatever. That question definitely provides a lot of rabbit holes for us to go down in. Because of that possibility, yeah, there's a lot of different there's a lot of different ways that we could look at where they are and where they could be, I should say, and how they got there. There are certain spells in the game that allow the spellcaster to view events from long ago. And the only one listed here is Galadriel, seer, mystic. She would have the ability to see what happened in the past, far back enough to when the Entwives were there in the Brownlands. I don't know if Galadriel will help us, um, but it's a possibility. That might be something else that the Entwife campaign attempts to do if they think of it. Radagast Brown can help, but not well. So I put together in my mind where help for the Entwife campaign may come from or could come from. Radagast Brown, top of the list. Um, the Noldor elves that are still in Middle-earth at this time. So the Entwife campaign is happening about a half a year after the destruction of the One Ring. So these folks are still in Middle-earth at this time. Oh, and I also, not only did I put their names down, but what their professions were, just to give us an idea of what kind of help we could expect from them. So Galadriel, Elrond, Glorfindel, and again, these guys would have, if Entwives were above ground during the Battle of Dagorlad, these guys would have seen them. I can't imagine that they could not have. And so that's I don't know, an interesting, that could lead us somewhere. We'll see. The Sylvan Elves, so Thranduil, the king of the elves of Mirkwood. Now this right here, Aragorn, the king of Gondor. So besides Galadriel, and possibly the pool of Galadriel, Aragorn, with the help of a Palantir, could possibly look back in time to when the Entwives were in the Brownlands. It's possible. So that's another possibility. Again, if Aragorn would actually consent to giving that a try, well, technically anyone who can use a Palantir could try to do that, really. Again, finding Aragorn or someone who can use a Palantir, finding a Palantir, having them do it, I don't know. Anyone who lived or lives in the Brownlands could be a help. Here's where we get into some interesting possibilities. The Golden Eagles of the Misty Mountains could be helpful. It's if the Entwives are in the east, like I suspect they are. There are another set of Golden Eagles in the mountain range in the east, and Golden Eagles tend to know what's going on, at least above ground. If there are Entwives above ground, chances are the Golden Eagles of the East Mountains will know about it. If we can get to them, and if they want to talk to us, we'll see. Okay, I'd mentioned this before. Any trees, because trees, generally speaking, can live a long time. If the Entwives passed through or passed close enough to Hurons or possibly just even normal trees, I'm not sure if Ents can actually, I think they can, but I have to check that for sure, that Ents can actually talk to just normal trees. And if normal trees would notice Entwives passing, we could get a beat on them that way. Any animist, rangers, druids, scouts, those foresty types, en route might be able to help. There are two, and we're going to be getting into this in the next video. The two wizards, Alatar and Palando, that are in the east, vying for power in the east. They should know if there are any Entwives in the east. Now, they may or may not help because right now they are vying against one another for power in the east, supposedly. So we'll take a greater look at that. I did put down their professions and also their alignment, if you will. You would think, or we would think, that Alatar would be more in tune to if there were Entwives there or not. Over and above Palando, this character here is going to be a wild card, and you'll see why. Looking at Lords of Middle-earth Volume 1, where you can find the stats for these folks, for these guys, what the authors and editors did to Palando make him more of a bad guy than a good guy. And you'll see why. This came to me just out of the blue at the last second. Just like there are Maya in the east, like Tom Bombadil, and technically Alatar and Palando are Maya too. There should be Maya, or those powerful spirit type beings, or powerful beings, in the east. Uh, there should be. I have no idea who they are, what their names could be. I'll do a little bit of checking into that before we start our campaign, but finding them or finding one could be a big uh, turning point of the Antwife campaign. Again, there should be some in the East. It'll be interesting. The Game Masterless role-playing system allows for any of this to happen, and that's why I'm tackling these possibilities like I am. It is important for us to know that these possibilities exist so that we can give them or allow them the possibility to appear in our quest to find the Entwives. And like I say, I'm pretty sure that quest is going to take us to the east. So I'm mentioning all of these things so that so that we can give them the chance to become realities on the way to the east. Hmm. That and that's actually a good way to set up the next video talking about, or I will be talking about the East. It's a totally different world than what happened in the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. It's going to be quite interesting and quite the adventure. This also kind of sets up a bit of the Game Masterless role-playing system. Like I say, it's quite the system. I think it's second to none, and it will take into account all these possibilities. The only difficulty is that we as players need to be aware of all the possibilities to give them a chance of becoming a part of the story. Comments, I put down comments and dedication. I've got a dedication here too. But comments, for those of you watching and keeping up with this, of course, now this is the Entwife campaign information. If you have any questions, any comments, any arguments, I'd love to hear about it. Just make sure to leave some comments if you do. And like I say, things will be getting even more interesting when we start looking at what the East looks like and some of the happenings or things that happened in the East that will help give us an idea of what the East is like. And finally, I'm filming this on Halloween. I've got another dedication. I dedicate this. There we go. I dedicate this video to my good friend Dustin. It's a special day for him today. This Halloween day, that's when I'm recording it. So this Lord of the Rings toast is to you, Dustin. I hope and pray that you have a great day, Halloween day. Things are still rolling along a little bit slow here for the Entwife campaign, but it's still moving, and it will continue to move until we actually start the game. I just keep thinking this is Frodo's glass. I have three others. One of them is Aragorn. One is his wife. Now I forget her name, and then Gandalf. her name is, and I should know this, shame on me, Arwen. There we go. But I still stick with Frodo, at least at this time. So, Dustin, again, I hope and pray that your day goes well. This toast of Lord of the Rings is to you. Oh. Again, leave those comments. Have a safe and good day. This is Halloween. Enjoy trick-or-treating when you do. And until next time, this is Merp Man. Take care, God bless, and we'll see you next